What if everything changed overnight? Imagine waking up to find the global economy crashing, markets freezing, and jobs disappearing like smoke. Sounds like a scary movie, right? But this isn't fiction. It's a terrifying possibility. If the United States falls into a recession, the impact wouldn't just stop at its borders. It could set off a domino effect that brings entire nations to their knees. Some countries depend on America's money, trade, and investments just to survive. Without it, their economies would break down fast. The shocking truth is, many of these nations are already barely holding on. So before we dive deep into the 10 countries that could collapse if the US crashes, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your thoughts matter. Now let's begin this eye-opening journey. Number 10, Canada. What if I told you that Canada's very survival depends on the United States? It may sound shocking, but it's true. Canada isn't as safe as you might think. In fact, its economy is deeply tied to the US, and if America falls into a recession, Canada could go down with it. Around 75% of Canada's exports, from cars to lumber, go straight to the US. That's a massive chunk of its economy, depending on just one neighbor. If the US economy slows down, demand drops. Suddenly, Canadian factories slow, exports crash, and thousands of jobs could disappear overnight. You might think, but Canada has oil, they'll be fine. Sadly, that's not the case. Oil prices are heavily influenced by US demand, and a US slowdown would send oil prices tumbling. This would crush Canada's oil industry, spark massive layoffs, and even trigger a housing market collapse. Even Canada's strong social systems can only hold out so long. The strain could break the system, pushing the country into a financial crisis, leaving millions struggling to stay afloat. Could Canada survive without the US? Not likely. Number 9, Mexico. You might believe Mexico is safe if the US economy crashes, but the truth is heartbreaking. The connection between the two countries runs much deeper than most people realize, and if the US goes down, Mexico could fall with it. Every year, billions of dollars in trade flow between the two nations. In 2023 alone, nearly 80% of all Mexico's exports, like cars, electronics, and fresh farm products, were sent to the United States. Now, imagine what happens if American families suddenly stop spending. Mexico's factories could shut down, workers laid off, and businesses forced to close. Unemployment would explode and poverty would spread like wildfire. But there's more pain. Many Mexican families rely on remittances, the money sent home by loved ones working in the US. These funds have become a lifeline. If wages in America fall, that flow of money could drop to a whisper, leaving millions of families with nothing. The result? A once hopeful country pushed to the edge of collapse, facing a storm it never saw coming. It's not just economics, it's human lives at stake. Number 8, South Korea. Have you ever stopped to think about how fragile a powerful tech country like South Korea really is? You'd be shocked to know that its economy is deeply tied to the United States. South Korea may be the home of famous brands like Samsung and Hyundai, but without the US, their future could suddenly fall apart. In 2023, more than 14% of South Korea's economy came from sending electronics, cars, and other goods to the US. But what if the US economy crashes? Demand would vanish overnight. Big American tech companies would stop buying semiconductors, South Korea's #1 export. And when that happens, factories shut down and jobs disappear fast. The shock wouldn't stop there. The whole economy could sink into chaos. Families would struggle as wages freeze, prices rise, and job security crumbles. People would stop spending and businesses would fail. Even nearby countries that depend on South Korea's tech exports could feel the pain. Could South Korea survive if the US economy collapsed? It's like sitting on a ticking time bomb ready to explode. Number 7, India. What if India's giant outsourcing industry suddenly collapsed because of a US recession? Sounds unbelievable, right? But the truth is both shocking and heartbreaking. India's growing tech and service world leans heavily on money from America. Nearly 60% of the income from India's IT sector comes from US companies. That means if America falls, India could fall with it. Imagine this. The US goes into recession. Companies there start cutting costs, and the first thing they slash is outsourcing. That would mean fewer contracts, canceled projects, and massive job losses across India, especially in cities like Bengaluru and Hyderabad where millions work in tech. And that's just the start. Many Indian families survive on remittances, money sent from loved ones working in the US. If those wages dry up, it would leave millions back home struggling, unable to pay bills or buy food. Can India handle such a hit? With its already fragile economy, the answer is frightening. Probably not. This kind of crash could lead to widespread poverty, emotional distress, and a national crisis no one saw coming. Number 6, Brazil. What if Brazil, the biggest economy in South America, could be brought to its knees by something as simple as a US recession? It sounds impossible, but the truth is shocking. Brazil's economy is more connected to the US than most people realize. From soybeans to iron ore to oil, Brazil ships huge amounts of goods to America. In fact, in 2023, over 20% of Brazil's exports went straight to the US. Now, imagine this. If Americans suddenly stopped buying, Brazil wouldn't just slow down, it could spiral into chaos. The farming industry would be hit hard, leaving thousands jobless. Families already dealing with rising poverty would fall even deeper into struggle and hunger. But that's not the worst part. Brazil's government debt is exploding, making the country very weak to shocks. If the US economy collapses, commodity prices would crash, oil exports would drop, and the Brazilian real could tumble, causing massive inflation and social unrest. Can Brazil survive such a storm? Right now, it's walking a thin line, and one wrong step could lead to economic disaster. Number 5, Turkey. Have you ever thought about what would happen to Turkey if the US economy suddenly crashed? You might be shocked to know how closely tied Turkey is to the American economy. Right now, Turkey is already in deep trouble, with sky-high inflation, a weak currency, and a population struggling to make ends meet. But if the US enters a recession, things in Turkey could go from bad to heartbreaking. Here's why. Turkey relies heavily on the US for trade. From textiles to machines, Turkish exports flow across the Atlantic. If the American economy slows down, demand for these products would drop fast, hurting Turkish businesses and costing people their jobs. But sadly, that's just the beginning. Turkey also depends on money from foreign investors, especially from the US. If a recession hits, those investors would pull their money out, sending the Turkish lira into freefall. Can you imagine prices rising so fast people can't afford basic groceries? That's the terrifying reality of inflation getting worse. Some might believe Turkey's spot between Europe and Asia could protect it. But the truth is painful. Its economy leans heavily on American trade, tourism, and capital. Without them, Turkey could spiral into deep financial and political chaos. Unemployment would soar, people would fill the streets in protest, and the country could face mass unrest. Can Turkey survive without the US? That's a scary and uncertain question. The cracks are already there, and all it would take is a US downturn to shatter the balance completely. Number 4, Saudi Arabia. Can you imagine a world where Saudi Arabia, the rich and powerful country of the Middle East, starts to fall apart because the US economy slows down? It might sound impossible, but the truth is both shocking and heartbreaking. Saudi Arabia depends heavily on the United States, especially when it comes to oil. Oil makes up over 90% of Saudi Arabia's income. And for years, the United States has been one of their biggest buyers. Now picture this. What if the US falls into a recession and people and businesses stop using so much oil? That means America would stop buying as much oil from Saudi Arabia, and suddenly billions of dollars would vanish from Saudi pockets. But that's just the beginning of the nightmare. If oil prices drop, it wouldn't just be a small problem. It would hit the very heart of Saudi Arabia's economy. You might think they can survive with their savings or wealth, but here's the sad truth. Without steady oil money, the entire system could crash like a house of cards. Saudi Arabia has been trying to build new industries and move away from oil, spending billions of dollars on projects and dreams of a better future. But if a US recession happens, all of that could fall apart. There would be no money to finish those plans. And worse, jobs would disappear, unemployment would rise, and people would grow angry and desperate. Imagine streets filled with people who once had stable jobs, now protesting, shouting, and begging for help. Social unrest could explode. A once powerful nation could fall into deep financial and political chaos. It's a terrifying thought, one that shows just how fragile even the richest countries can be when one piece of the global puzzle breaks. Number 3, Argentina. Have you ever stopped to think how a country that's already struggling could fall even deeper into crisis if the world economy took a hit? Let's talk about Argentina, a country that's been fighting a losing battle with its economy for years. But what if the US, one of the world's biggest powers, fell into a recession? You'd be shocked to know how deeply connected Argentina is to the fate of the American economy. Right now, Argentina is barely holding on. Inflation is out of control over 100%, which means prices are going up so fast that ordinary people can't keep up. The national currency, the peso, is losing its value day by day. People are watching their savings disappear overnight. And yet Argentina depends on exports, things like soybeans, wheat, and oil to survive. A lot of that gets sold to the US market. So what happens if the US economy slows down? Demand for Argentina's goods would drop sharply, and that would be devastating. Farms, factories, and workers all across Argentina would feel the pain. Jobs would be lost. Families who were already struggling would be pushed to the edge. The pain would be widespread and heartbreaking. But it gets worse. Argentina also owes a lot of money to foreign banks, many of them in the US. If the US goes into a recession, those banks might refuse to lend more money. Argentina could then face a debt crisis, unable to pay back what it already owes. Imagine the government running out of cash, public services failing, people flooding the streets in protest. It would be chaos. This could cause hyperinflation, where money becomes nearly worthless. The prices of food, medicine, and fuel could skyrocket. Millions could be left hungry and hopeless. Social unrest could spread like wildfire. Argentina is like a ticking time bomb, and a US recession could be the spark that sets everything off. But here's the scary part. This wouldn't stop with Argentina. If it falls, the economic shock could ripple across other countries too, pulling more nations into a deep, dark crisis. And that's the sad reality of a world that's all tangled together. One powerful country falls, and others go down with it. Number 2, Nigeria. Have you ever thought about how a country so rich in natural resources could fall apart because of a crisis far away? It sounds unbelievable, but sadly, Nigeria is at serious risk, and a US recession could be the final blow. You might be shocked to learn just how much Nigeria depends on oil and global trade, especially with the United States. More than 90% of Nigeria's export income comes from oil, and a big part of that oil goes to the US. Now imagine if the US economy crashes. If America stops buying as much oil, Nigeria's income would drop instantly, like a switch being flipped. Without this money, how would the government pay for things like schools, hospitals, roads, or salaries? The country could fall into chaos. People would suffer. And the already weak economy could start to crumble quickly. It's easy to think that Nigeria's oil wealth would protect it, but the truth is heartbreaking. The country's future is tied to the unpredictable global oil market. And when oil prices fall, Nigeria falls with them. But oil is just part of the problem. Nigeria is already facing serious poverty, joblessness, and political unrest. Many Nigerian families survive only because of money sent home by loved ones working in other countries, including the US. But what if a US recession means those jobs disappear and the money stops coming? Just picture it. Millions of families left with nothing. Prices of food and fuel rising fast, and more people losing jobs every day. The streets could fill with protests, anger, and fear. Tensions would grow, and life for ordinary Nigerians would become even harder. With a fragile economy, weak infrastructure, and a heavy reliance on oil, Nigeria could face a total economic breakdown. Could this be the moment when Africa's most populated country finally breaks under pressure? The answer is not just sad, it's terrifying. And it reminds us just how deeply connected our world really is. When one giant falls, others may fall with it. Number 1, China. Have you ever thought about how the world's second biggest economy could be shattered by a US recession? It might sound hard to imagine, but China, which has enjoyed years of amazing growth, could be in serious trouble. The truth is shocking. China depends heavily on the US for its exports and manufacturing. Every year, China sends almost $450 billion worth of goods to the US. But what would happen if the US could no longer buy all those goods because of a recession? Demand for Chinese-made products would drop dramatically. This would cause factories to slow down, leading to massive job losses and a huge drop in China's economic growth. Can you imagine a country that's been booming for decades suddenly falling apart because people stop buying what they make? That's not the worst part. China is also heavily reliant on American investments. If US companies start pulling out because of the recession, China's economy could be crushed. But this is just the beginning of the nightmare. China's debt crisis is already huge. Companies and the government have borrowed so much money, and a recession would make it even harder to pay all of it back. Imagine a country that has grown so fast suddenly facing an economic disaster. It's like everything they've built could come crashing down as they struggle with mounting debt and a slowing economy. How long could China hold on under all that pressure? But wait, there's more. If the US falls into a recession, countries all around the world would also buy less. Global demand for Chinese exports would drop even further. This means China's factories would get even less business, making the country's financial problems worse. So, what happens when China, a once thriving economic giant, starts to struggle? It could be the beginning of a massive shift in global economic power. If China can't recover, the country could be left desperately trying to survive in a world where things are changing fast. With rising debt, weakening demand, and so much uncertainty, China's future may not be as secure as it once seemed. It's clear that a US recession could lead to devastating effects for some of the world's biggest economies. From countries like Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, which rely on oil, to global manufacturing hubs like China, the damage could be huge. The big question is, can these countries survive? Or will they collapse under all the pressure? If this video gave you something to think about, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. Your support helps us keep bringing you more eye-opening insights into the world's economy. Stay tuned for more and hit the bell for notifications on future videos. Thanks for watching.